Every year, hundreds of essays drift off course, leaving readers to fend for themselves in a sea of ideas, arguments, and explanation. It's such a senseless tragedy, especially when you consider that these shipwrecks could have been easily avoided with the addition of a strong thesis statement.
The CGCC Writing Center is committed to eliminating these academic casualties. That's why we've created this informative, educational,
and interesting
video workshop. We want students to have the tools they need to craft an effective thesis statement on their own.
With our help, you'll learn all about thesis statements and how they can help keep your papers on course. Let's get started. Hi, I'm Veronica, one of the tutors here at the Chandler-Gilbert Community College Writing Center.
And I'm Shannon. I also tutor here in the center. Every semester we help dozens of students craft effective thesis statements and organize their essays so ideas and arguments make sense to their readers. We've built this workshop around the most common questions and problems that we see here at the Writing Center.
We hope this workshop answers most of your questions about thesis statements. But don't forget that you can get personalized one-on-one help with your essays and thesis statements at the Writing Center. We're located on the second floor of the library in L227.
We're open Monday through Wednesday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., Thursdays from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and Fridays from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Saturday tutoring is also available by appointment.
Okay, enough of the shameless self-promotion. Let's get started with some basic information. Why do we even need a thesis statement in the first place?
Well, it's part of the big picture. Part of going to college involves demonstrating your ability to think critically. You prove that by successfully constructing argumentative essays that include and persuasively support strong positions. In a thesis statement, your reader can clearly see your position in an argument and why you chose that position.
But not all papers need a thesis statement. In narrative and descriptive writing, a thesis statement may be less important. However, you may still want to include a statement in your introduction to let your readers know what to expect in the rest of the paper.
If you're not sure whether you need a thesis statement, just check with your instructor.
So, what is a thesis statement anyway? First, a thesis statement makes an argumentative assertion about a topic. It states the conclusions that you have reached about that particular topic.
The biggest mistake that we see in the Writing Center is that students write thesis statements that aren't really arguments. You have to be able to imagine an intelligent and sane person taking a position different than yours.
For example, let's say your thesis statement is, poverty is bad because it leads to malnutrition, low self-esteem, and limited opportunities. Can you really imagine anyone arguing that poverty is good?
On the other hand, if you wrote, we must overcome poverty once and for all by raising taxes to help the poor, you can definitely imagine a reasonable person disagreeing with how you want to overcome poverty.
Your opposition might reasonably argue that lowering taxes could overcome poverty by encouraging businesses to create new jobs.
But no one's arguing that poverty is bad. That fact is assumed within the argument.
So your first job is to make sure that your thesis statement is truly taking an arguable position and not just stating facts that no one would disagree with.
Second, thesis statements make a promise to the reader about the scope, purpose, and direction of your paper.
In other words, your thesis statement not only tells your reader what position you've taken, but also why.
Thesis statements are focused and specific enough to be proven within the boundaries of your paper.
For example, in a 5 to 7 page paper, it's going to be tough to effectively argue that animal rights should be respected.
That topic is just way too broad. Instead, it might be better to focus on one particular aspect of animal rights. You could argue that animals have intellectual or emotional capacities that make them worthy of respect.
Or you could focus on the treatment of animals in zoos or in scientific research.
The most important thing is to make sure you have a narrow topic. A topic that is too broad can't be covered in enough depth.
A thesis statement is generally located near the end of the introduction. Sometimes, in a longer paper, the thesis will be expressed in several sentences or in an entire paragraph.
Remember, These are general writing guidelines. Your instructor may have more explicit directions regarding where to place your thesis statement and how long it should be. When in doubt, ask your teacher.
Finally, a thesis statement identifies the relationships between the pieces of evidence that you are using to support your argument.
It's very important that you not just throw evidence at your readers and hope that they will connect the dots. You need to present support for your position and show how that support relates to your thesis.
Here's an example sentence. Overall, the movement of women from the traditional role, introduction into society, and their standing up against male segregation paved the way for women in the working class.
In this thesis, we can clearly see 3 ways that the writer plans to show how different aspects of the women's movement paved the way for women in the working class.
But this writer won't just be discussing these areas as informational sections. She'll be relating each point back to her thesis statement. That's how we know the relationship between all the evidence the writer plans to present in her essay.
Okay, now that you know a little bit more about thesis statements, let's get down to what you really want to know. Some students think they need to write a thesis statement before they start doing any research or drafting, or before they start doing anything at all. That way, they think they'll have a clear idea of what research they need to do.
However, the best way to write a thesis statement is to draft a working thesis statement that can be revised as more is learned about the topic and ideas and arguments are developed. Only after you've explored the question at hand can you formulate a working thesis statement.
That's right. A thesis statement is the evolutionary result of your thinking process. It's not just some miraculous thought that pops into your head. So that means that formulating a thesis is not the first thing you do after reading your essay assignment.
Before you can come up with an argument on any topic, you must first collect and organize evidence, look for possible relationships between known facts, and think about the beneath-the-surface significance of these relationships. Now remember that your thesis statement will probably have to be adjusted as you learn more information and begin to draft your paper.
And that's okay. In fact, you should be suspicious if your thesis statement doesn't change during the process of researching and writing your paper.
Once you've written your thesis statement, how do you determine if it's a good one?
Here are a few questions you can ask yourself. First, does your thesis statement respond to the assignment?
No matter how dazzling, a thesis statement that doesn't respond to the assignment is not a good thesis. If you are asked to take a stand, do you? Rereading the assignment after constructing a thesis statement can help you fix an argument that misses the focus of the assignment. The second question you can ask yourself is, have I taken a position that others might challenge or oppose? If not, you probably don't have a strong argument. Thesis statements that are too vague also have this problem. If your thesis contains vague words like good or successful, see if you can be more specific. Why is something good? What makes something successful? The so what test asks whether your thesis presents a position or an interpretation worth pursuing. If a reader's first response is, so what, then you need to clarify, forge a relationship, or connect to a larger issue.
If you're not sure if your thesis statement passes the so what test, why not visit the Writing Center and have a tutor take a look?
That's a great idea, Shannon. We'd be happy to take a look at your thesis statement at any time.
The final question to ask yourself is, does my essay support my thesis specifically and without wandering off somewhere?
Just as a thesis that doesn't respond to the assignment ultimately fails, so does a thesis that isn't properly supported with evidence and reasoning. If your thesis and the body of your essay do not seem to go together, one of them has to change.
Remember, always reassess and revise your writing as necessary.
Now that you know so much more about thesis statements and how to compose them, let's practice your newfound knowledge with a little game.
Faculty, if you would like to make this an interactive exercise, just pause the videotape after each sentence and have your own in-class discussion.
Here's our first sample thesis statement. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address and Pericles' funeral oration are two of the best speeches that credit people who are willing to sacrifice their lives for others.
This thesis statement definitely needs a revision. The writer is trying to take a stand when he or she says that these speeches are two of the best speeches, but we really don't know why.
This is a good example of a thesis that lacks focus. The writer is using vague, superficial terms and not defining exactly what the paper will cover.
To prepare the thesis statement, the writer should determine why these two speeches are the best. Is the writer planning to compare these speeches to other speeches or writing?
If not, it might be better for the writer to think in terms of why these speeches were effective, instead of the best. What goals did the speakers accomplish? How and why?
To fix vague thesis statements, try to use the word because while you're drafting your thesis.
So this writer would begin rewriting the thesis statement by writing, "These two speeches were effective because." That will help the writer to decide what the paper's focus will be.
Remember, thesis statements can be more than one sentence in length, unless your teacher specifies otherwise. This writer might be trying to do too much in just one sentence.
I agree. Let's try another thesis statement. First, I will explain one of John Berger's views on how we see images. Then I will interpret the painting that I have chosen and whether or not it meets Berger's expectations of paintings and ways of seeing.
We see quite a lot of these types of thesis statements here in the Writing Center.
We call these the first I'll do this, then I'll do that statements. The problem with it is that it just looks like the writer is building the thesis statement to meet the assignment.
Now don't get us wrong. Using your assignment sheet is important. You should notice and use key words and phrases in the assignment sheet to make sure that you are staying on track.
The problem with this thesis statement is that it's just a bunch of answers to your teacher's questions strung together in a pseudo-thesis statement.
If your teacher just wanted you to answer questions, he or she probably wouldn't assign a whole essay to write. Essays are a way for you to demonstrate independent thinking. What relationships do you see between ideas, people, or arguments? How will you support your ideas?
This thesis statement doesn't make the reader feel confident that the writer really knows her stuff about John Berger or painting. It feels like the writer is just trying to get the assignment done, and that doesn't inspire confidence or interest in the reader.
But this type of thesis statement could be a good working thesis statement. The writer could start with this thesis statement as she continues her research and drafting. She just needs to be sure to develop this into a strong thesis statement for her final draft.
Okay, how about this thesis statement? Gandhi advocated both nonviolence towards living things and firmness based on truth as weapons to battle injustice and tyranny.
It certainly seems like this writer knows her stuff.
In just one sentence, we already know a lot more about Gandhi than we did a few minutes ago.
But what we don't have yet is an argument. What does the writer plan to prove by the end of her essay?
Now, this thesis statement is just fine if the writer's job is to inform her readers about Gandhi's philosophies. Some essays are purely informational.
But this video focuses on thesis statements for academic argumentative papers. In this case, this thesis statement presents facts. There's really not an argument just yet.
Okay, Shannon, here's a thesis statement that does include an argument. What do you think? All zoos are cruel to animals. They house the defenseless beasts in horrid conditions that breed disease and lead to premature death. Therefore, these inhumane establishments should be abolished.
The writer obviously feels very strongly about her subject. We definitely have an argument here.
But there are a few problems with this thesis statement. First, it's very subjective. The writer is presenting her opinions as facts. For example, all zoos are cruel to animals is a sweeping generalization based on the writer's conclusions. It's not an established fact.
Second, the writer is presenting an all-or-nothing argument, offering extreme solutions to a problem. For example, all zoos should be abolished, will make readers lose confidence because the writer seems like an extremist in her viewpoints. Let's try rewriting this thesis statement a different way. While some zoos have genuinely attempted to improve the living conditions and treatment of animals in captivity, most still offer squalid, cramped conditions, not much improved over their 19th century counterparts. With the proliferation of large, animal-friendly game farms and wildlife preserves, a reassessment of our social responsibilities, and an advancement of technology, it no longer seems necessary to maintain the outdated establishment known as the zoo.
The advantage of this thesis statement is that while it still argues that zoos are unpleasant places for animals and should be eliminated, it does so by showing that other, more humane options are available.
That makes it a whole lot easier for an intelligent, reasonable reader to agree with the writer. Extreme all-or-nothing arguments can be difficult for readers to accept.
Making it easy for your reader to accept your point of view is really the whole point of an argument essay. Keep that in mind when writing your own thesis statements.
We hope this workshop has answered most of your questions. The Writing Center also offers handouts on thesis statements and how to organize your paper.
Remember, you can visit with the tutor at any time in the Writing Center for help with your thesis statements or other writing concerns. We look forward to seeing you in the Writing Center soon.